Hey, my friends, it's Leah with your Winning Wednesday, WINSDAY, coming to you, yay, from outside today. It is a gorgeous day, and I hope you're having a wonderfully winning day and a fabulously winning week. Today, we're going to continue our study in the book of Jude, and I do apologize if you were looking for me a few minutes ago. I had to kind of adjust some things because I changed my internet, and so had to make a few adjustments, so I didn't get to come on at the normal time, which is 1:45. So thank you for joining me if you are with me today. And if you're watching this later, you'll know where I've been. So today we're going to continue in our study in the book of Jude, and we're going to just look at verses 12 through 16 today. So let's just get right into it and look at Jude, which is a one-chapter book, and we're going to look at just a few verses 12 through 16. So let's read that together. I'm reading it out of the New King James Version this week, and we're going to be looking at some of the meanings of some of these words. So let's look at this, verses 12 through 16. It says, these are spots in your love feast. Okay, so let's go back and let's talk about what we've already been looking at. What Jude is talking about here is false teachers. So he's talking about all of that, everything that has to do with false teachers, and he's giving a warning, an admonishment about false teachers. So he says, these are spots in your love feasts. While they feast with you without fear, serving only themselves, they are clouds without water, carried about by the winds, late autumn trees without fruit, twice dead, pulled up by the roots, raging waves of the sea, foaming up their own shame, wandering stars for whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. That's a lot of stuff right there just in those two verses. So verse 14, it says, now Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about these men also, saying, behold, the Lord comes with 10,000 of his saints, 10,000s of his saints, to execute judgment on all, to convict all who are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds, which they have committed in an ungodly way, and of all the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. These are grumblers, complainers, walking according to their own lusts, and they mouth great swelling words, flattering people to gain advantage. Boy, that's a big warning. And so let's just look at what he's actually saying. So first of all, he says these are spots in your love feasts. And I just thought that was a real interesting thing. And I named this spots. Today's word is spots because of what this is talking about. Now, when you look up the word spot, you find a lot of definitions because it's a descriptive, it's a verb, and it's a noun. And here he's using it as a noun. So let's talk about what he's saying. It's a small area, which we all know because we've probably all had clothing that had a spot on it. And so it's an area that's visibly different from everything else. As in color or finish or material from the surrounding area. So if you've ever had an article of clothing that had spots on it. So like I have a dress that's black, but it has white spots. So the white spots look different from the rest of the fabric, which is black. So that's what that is describing. It's an area marred or marked by something such as dirt or mud. Maybe you have a spot on a piece of furniture that has, that's discolored because somebody spilled something, or maybe it has a spot because it's been marred, like it's been scratched, a piece of wood that's been scratched. So it's talking about something like that. It's a circumscribed surface lesion because of disease. So like, for instance, if you have the measles or if you have chicken pox, then you've got spots on your skin. So that's talking about that. It can also be talking about decay, a spot of decay. The number one definition, however, the very first definition that you'll find on the word spot is a taint on character. I just thought that was very interesting because that is exactly what Jude is talking about here. A taint on character or reputation, someone who is tainted in character or reputation. So with that word defined, let's talk about what these spots are that Jude is talking about, these false teachers who are spots. Because the first thing he says is they are spots in your love feasts. So what does he mean by that? Because he's talking about love feast. Well, what is a love feast? A love feast were things that Christians, the early Christians, held these feasts, and it was talking about the agape love of Christ. And so they were trying to show how they showed that toward one another. And so they would have these big feasts so that everybody would bring their own food. So everybody brought their own provisions, kind of like what we call a potluck. And so everybody would bring their own stuff, and they would have these big feasts. Well, they were continuing to do this. And in the book of Corinthians, Paul is he's reprimanding the people because they were having these love feasts, but they were not doing it correctly because everybody would bring their own stuff, but they weren't sharing it with one another. So the people who didn't have very much didn't have enough, and the people who had a lot had more than enough, but they weren't sharing with what they had. So instead of bringing it as a potluck, everybody only had their own stuff that they brought. So Paul reprimanded them for that. But what Jude is talking about here is these love feasts that were genuine love feasts, where everyone would come and they would celebrate the love of Christ and celebrate their love for one another. And it was just a communal meal where these Christians would gather for the meal, and they would socialize, and they would also have Christian fellowship. So that's what this is talking about. Now, if you look in Acts chapter 2, verses 46 and 47, it alludes to this. And it says that they continued daily with one accord in the temple and breaking bread from house to house. And so that's what they were talking about. He was talking about, when Luke wrote the book of Acts, he was talking about the things that these early Christians would do. So they would have these love feasts, and it says they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved. So they were having these big festivals, celebrating the love of Christ and celebrating their transformed lives in Him, and eating together and socializing and fellowshipping in that love of Christ. So these feasts were not the problem that Jude is talking about. The problem was the false teachers who were coming in to the feasts. And so what he was saying is that they were pretending to be part of this fellowship, but they were and are, and I said and are because we see this today, they're wolves in sheep's clothing. They're ravenous wolves. They're coming in for their own gain. They're trying to gain people's trust by celebrating in these love feasts and fellowshipping with the Christians, but they're not true Christians. These spots are the blemishes of the love feasts. And so in the Greek, the word is spilos, and it means a stain or a blemish, a defect or a disgrace. And so in verse 12, in the English Standard Version, it reads like this: these are hidden reefs. So like in the ocean, a reef, that like a coral reef, they're hidden reefs. And it says, these are hidden reefs at your love feast as they feast with you without fear. Shepherds feeding themselves. So they're pretending to be shepherds of the people, but they're really doing it for their own gain. And that's what this is talking about. And when it says hidden reefs, what it's saying, it's signifying their ability to create a shipwreck. So it takes people who are true believers, and it's talking about them becoming a shipwreck in their believing life. And so this is what this is talking about. So they're hidden from us. It's the wolves in sheep's clothing, hidden reefs. They're under the surface, but they're really creating problems. So then in verse 12, he goes on and says that they're clouds without water. So they lack the refreshing shower of truth. So they're not bringing truth. They're bringing falsehood. They're teaching wrong doctrines. And so it's clouds without water. They don't have the refreshing showers of the truth. He says the winds of their passions are what, and their licentiousness is what's carrying them away from the truth. See, in verse 12, it says they are clouds without water, carried about by the winds. So the wind is just, whatever whim they have is what is driving where they go. And so they have no truth that they're carrying, and they're just carried on the wind of their own passion, their own licentiousness, the things that they want to do, and that's all they care about. And so that is what carries them around, doing everything. So then verse 13 says, raging waves of the sea. And when it's talking about this, it says that they're foaming of their own wickedness and shame. So it's like a troubled sea rather than a calm sea. So they're just kicking up all these waves and the shame of what they're doing. And it creates all these problems among the people who are true believers. So they're creating a problem with their false teaching, is what he's saying. And it creates this wave of shame and waves of problems. And that's what they're doing. And then he goes on in that same verse, in verse 13, he says, wandering stars for whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. And I thought this was a really interesting analogy that Jude drew for us here. So a wandering star is like it refers to like a meteor. So something out in outer space, in the blackness of space, it's just floating around without any kind of direction or guidance. And so when it talks about this blackness of darkness, it says, wandering stars for whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. He says, these ones who are spots on your love feast, they're clouds without water, they're carried about by the winds of their passions, they're late autumn trees without fruit. So it's like a tree that has no fruit on it. And it's a raging wave of the sea, foaming up their own shame, wandering stars. And he says, for whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. So when you look at this blackness of darkness, it's talking about utter darkness, darkness that reigns, eternal darkness. And when you go back to Matthew chapter 8, verse 12, Jesus talks about this outer darkness. And he says this is where there would be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And so when you think about this, it's talking about the bitter remorse and pain that these people are going to have because God is going to judge them for what they've done. And they will be forever expelled into this outer darkness. No more light for them. And so it's kind of it's a terrifying picture when we look at it. But that's what he's talking about. Now, when we go back to verse 12, there's something that I want to talk about here because he says, late autumn trees without fruit, twice dead, pulled up by the roots. So they're uprooted, twice dead and uprooted. So this could refer to becoming dead again in trespasses and sins. And remember, we've talked about this because God never removes our free will. We always have the choice of whether we want to continue to follow him or not. And so if we choose to stop following after him, then it's like twice dead. We are uprooted. We are uprooting ourselves when we leave this life. So these are people who have traded the truth for a lie for the sake of their own gain, whether it's financial gain or popularity with people. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, the gain that they want, they have chosen to trade the truth for their personal gain. They've chosen to forsake the truth for their pride. And that's what they want to do. They want to suit their own purposes rather than keep the truth and serve God and fulfill his purpose for their lives. So they're twice dead. So this means that they were once dead in sin. They came to Christ and then they chose to leave because they chose the lie rather than the truth. And so they choose to go away again. And so that's a second death for them, which means they are going to be cast forever in outer darkness because they have rejected the truth. They've chosen the lie rather than the truth. And we read about this in Hebrews, that it is possible for us to turn away from the truth. There is no hope for us. If we choose Jesus and then we go, you know what? I don't really like this life because I don't feel like I'm gaining anything. So I'm going to turn back to my old ways. I'm going to but I'm going to keep declaring that I'm a Christian, even though I'm not living for him. That's what this is talking about. I'm no longer living for him, but I'm going to stay in this. I'm going to try to stay in the sheepfold because I'm going to continue with these people. So they become the false teachers, false leaders, and all of that. That's what Jude is talking about here. And he says he's warning true believers against these false teachers, but he's also warning the false teachers, if you choose this, you're cast into outer darkness forever. There's no hope for you any longer. So let's go on. In verses 14 and 15, it says, now Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about these men also, saying, behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment on all, to convict all who are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have committed in an ungodly way, and of all the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Have you noticed how many times he says ungodly? So we know that these people are not followers of Christ because they're living ungodly lives. They're living in ungodly ways. They're bringing ungodly judgment against others, and then they're going to be separated and cast into outer darkness. So Jude is quoting here from Enoch. And he quoted from the apocryphal writings of Enoch. And now those are not, they're not inside the canon, but that is what Jude is quoting from. Even though they're not part of our Bible, there is a book of Jude that you can get and read, and it's very apocryphal in its writings. But he quoted from Enoch in an effort to warn these false teachers whose mission it was to lead believers astray from the truth of Christ. And we know that those are still in existence. People are still trying to lead people away from Christ and leading away from the truth of Christ. And so Jude is warning the false teachers, but he's warning us, pay attention to what's going on around you. He's warning the true Christ followers to beware of false teachers. Be aware, they're out there, and beware of them. Be wary when you see these false teachers coming around and telling things that you go, oh, I'm not sure that that's the truth. So we need to know the truth so we can perceive the lie. That is what Jude is warning us about. Know the truth so you can perceive the lie. We can't know the lie. We can't perceive the falsehood if we don't know the truth. And I say that almost every week, but it's just the truth. We've got to know the truth of the Word of God in order to perceive the lie that might come at us. We know that Satan is out here. He is trying to deceive us. He's trying to tell us lies and get us to believe the lies. And the only way we can tell the lie from the truth is if we know the truth. So we've got to know the truth in order to perceive the lie. So that's what Jude is warning us about here. And he says the Lord is coming with 10,000s of his saints. Now that's obviously not an exact number, but he's saying there are a lot that are going to come with Christ. And this is talking about the second coming of Jesus Christ. So this is after the rapture of the church. So after that time when Jesus appears in the clouds, the trumpet's going to sound, there's going to be a shout, and he's going to call his army. And so we're going to be raptured. We're going to go up and be with him. And so this is talking about after that rapture of the church, after the judgment seat of Christ. So after all of those who are his true believers, Jesus, he rewards us for those things that we have done in this life. So we are his bride. We've been raptured. We've stood in front of him, and he's given us our rewards and our assignments for what is to come. And then it's after that and after the marriage supper of the Lamb, and then Jesus will return with his saints. And so what this is talking about is when Jesus returns to rule and reign on earth for 1,000 years. So his millennial reign, that is the second coming of Christ. That's what that is. So there's the rapture of the church and then that second coming of Christ. So in verse 15, it says that he comes to execute judgment on all. So when he says that, it means on all of those who are on earth, who to judge their ungodly deeds and their ungodly actions, their ungodly words, their rejection of Christ. So he's coming to judge that. Okay. And then in verse 16, it tells us who these people are. He says, these are grumblers, complainers, walking according to their own lusts. And they mouth great swelling words. I love that description. Great swelling words, flattering people to gain advantage. So he's telling us who these people are. The ESV reads like this. It says, these are grumblers, malcontents, following their own sinful desires. They are loud-mouthed boasters. I love it. Loud-mouthed boasters, showing favoritism to gain advantage. So they're grumblers, complainers, walking according to their own lusts. They're loud, they're boastful, and they're flattering for the purpose of gaining an advantage. So Jude is giving us a very descriptive warning against those who are bringing false teaching. So we need to know the truth so that we can perceive the lie, so that we can tell who it is among us, because he says these are people that they're coming into your love feasts. So there are people that are trying to come in among you and deceive you. So if there's anybody that is deceiving other people, we know where that comes from, don't we? Because who is the great deceiver? It's Satan. And so we know that when people are coming into our midst and they're trying to deceive us, then we know the origin of that deceit. And that is Satan. When they're sowing seeds of discord among us, because they're planting seeds of doubt in people and all of that kind of stuff. That is what Jude is talking about here. People who are bringing absolute false doctrine, who say, well, Jesus isn't really the Christ, or they deny his deity, or anything like that, or they're just sowing seeds of discord to create doubt among us. We know that that is coming directly from Satan. And Jude says, be aware that these people are coming in among you. And that way you can know when they're telling a lie, because you know the truth. So that's what this is all about. It's great. It's a great lesson. It's very deep in just a few verses. So read it for yourselves out of Jude, verses 12 through 16, and get this message in your heart and understand that you need to know the truth so you can perceive a lie. Whew. Jude is deep. It's just a few verses long, but it's really, really deep and powerful information that we need in our lives every day. So remember, be watching for the spots on the fabric. Be watching for the spots on the fabric. And that's what these wolves in sheep's clothing are. Okay, so let me end today by sharing with you that we will be meeting tonight at 6 o'clock for our children, youth, and women's Bible study. And then we will be meeting Sunday morning at 10 o'clock for Sunday school and discipleship, and 11 o'clock for our regular worship service. Now, on Sunday mornings, we have been having, in our adult Bible study, we're having a series of lessons on the end times and all of that my husband Mike is teaching, and it's been really, really good. We're not recording those, so we would love for you to join us live if you are in the Wellington, Texas area, and join us for that. That's at 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings, and then that is immediately followed by our worship service at 11 o'clock. Now, we do live stream our worship service, and so if you're not in the Wellington area, you can catch us right here on this YouTube page. And I think something just crawled right in front of the camera. I'm not sure. I think a little bug is on the camera. But anyway, we are live streaming our 11 o'clock service. And so if you are in the Wellington area, we'd love for you to join us in person. We meet at 1000 Emerald Street in Wellington, Texas. If you are not in Wellington, you can join us right here on this Facebook page. And we are trying to move everything over to our YouTube channel, which is currently under my name. It's Leah46327. So we're running all of our Wednesday stuff is on that YouTube channel. So I'm trying to load all of our Sunday morning stuff on the YouTube channel as well. So it'll be a while before all of that gets done, but hopefully we can get that taken care of before too much time goes by. And we'll be live streaming there as well. So right now we're just live streaming on the Facebook page. So that's Wellington, TX Church of the Nazarene. If you can catch us at 11 o'clock Central Time, because we are in Texas. So that's 11 o'clock Central Time that our live stream goes out. And again, we meet tonight at 6 o'clock for children, youth, and women's ministries, and then Sunday morning at 10 o'clock for Sunday school and discipleship, and 11 o'clock for our worship service. So until I see you, have a wonderfully winning day, a fabulously winning week, and I will see you soon. See you then.